Good morning. What time do you guys start today? Early. That's like later than you normally start though, right? You guys are early risers. Well, nice to be here with you today. It's fantastic always to talk to people that really that I've never spoke to before, because then I get to use my old jokes and you guys will not throw tomatoes and things like that. I talk about invasive species a lot. And my standpoint is I come from a conservation background, so I protect things in Hawaii. I like the way things are when I grew up here, and I really want my kids and her kids to have that in the future. So that's sort of where I come from, born and raised here. I went to Roosevelt High School, went to UH. I tried to go away, but I got rained out. I went to Seattle, and it was too rainy there, so I came home. And I'm glad to be able to have this job to work to protect Hawaii. I feel blessed. And I think that you folks are really taking an amazing step to helping us protect Hawaii. When DOT came up with this idea, I thought, wow, we're going to have an army of people out there along our roadsides helping us. So thank you, guys. So invasive species today. Yes, got it. All right. I always start all of my presentations, no matter, even if I talk to a group in conservation, with a definition. Really, what is it I'm talking about when I talk about native species, or introduced species, or alien species, or invasive species? Because they really do have specific definitions, and I don't want to get to the end of the presentation and say, really, isn't everything invasive? The answer is actually no. So what are native species? Native species are plants and animals that arrived here naturally, that is without our help, or the help of our airplanes or ships. They got here by the 3 W's, would tell the kids in school today. If you ask your kids, what are the 3 W's, they can probably tell you. They're wind, wings, or water. They floated here. And all of the descendants of these colonists. So a bird managed to fly across the ocean by itself, landed here, was able to have keiki and reproduce. All of those and all of their descendants are all native species. The begonia that I carried in when I moved to the state, native or not native? Not native, right. It wouldn't have got here if it hadn't been for me, my airplane, my ship, whatever it is. So going into that next explanation, alien or non-native species. These are plants and animals, including the seeds, the eggs, the tree cutting I took, or whatever it is, that arrived here with me, with people, or with our transportation systems. They couldn't arrive here on their own. So Hawaii has no native snakes. Snakes are really bad at flying. Birds couldn't carry them. They couldn't float here on the water, nor could they swim here. Good way to keep it in your mind what native and not native is. And we have a couple of really good examples down here. Now, alpaca, one of our most common, I guess that pointer thingy isn't working, on the left. Native plant. You see the white berries on them. Those berries are the protection for the seed. They're able to float in salt water for 3 months or more without the salt water ruining the seed. So they were able to float here, plant themselves, and they're native species. They're found all around the Pacific because they did this everywhere. They floated everywhere, and everywhere they landed, they pretty much could grow. Plumeria, on the other hand, has anybody seen a plumeria seed? A friend of mine's tree is actually putting out seed pods these days, but it's really rare because we lack the pollinator for this plumeria. And the seeds are huge. They can't be carried by birds. They couldn't have floated here on the wind, and they're not water protected. They're not resistant to saltwater inundation. So good examples. Well, what happened here? We never had a definition of invasive species, and people were sort of arguing about what that might be when then President Clinton came out with an executive order in 1999. Order 13112 was signed, establishing the National Invasive Species Council. And they did this because there were all of these projects across the nation that were using federal funds to do planting or moving species around. And some of those were being removed and controlled by another federal agency. So one agency was saying, yeah, plant this kudzu, and this other federal agency was responsible for cleaning out of the roadside. And he saw that disconnect there. So he said, okay, we got to stop putting money into promoting invasive species. The next question came up, well, how do you define it? So we had to make a federal definition. The executive order states that each federal agency whose actions may affect the status of invasive species shall, quote, not authorize, fund, or carry out actions that believes it's likely to cause or promote the introduction or spread of invasive species in the United States. And kudzu is a great example. It was brought in and cultivated and promoted as a roadside stabilizer because it grows really fast and it stabilizes the soil. The problem is that it grows really fast, and not only does it stabilize the soil, but it grows over everything, including power lines and houses and cars that are parked there for more than a week. And it causes some real problems. So from the executive order, we also get some of these definitions. The definition of an invasive species is it's a non-native species or an alien species whose introduction does or is likely to cause economic or environmental harm or harm to human health. So that's kind of an interesting sort of big net to throw. It can be an invasive species if it causes environmental harm or harm to our health, if it's non-native. So from this definition, can you have a native invasive species? No, it's got to be an alien species, an introduced species. You can have certainly aggressive growth in native species. You can have things that grow really quick, but it cannot by definition be invasive. And not only that, not all alien species are invasive. You could probably think of, if you just sort of sit here for a moment and think of an example of an introduced alien species that is non-invasive. Anybody seen plumeria spread beyond where you put it? Any groves of plumeria up in the forest that people are trying to control? No. It just doesn't happen. It doesn't have those tendencies. So what is that process of something becoming invasive then? What does it take? Well, it takes an introduction. So it's got a new location. It's not native there. It's usually introduced to a place where it doesn't have competitors, where it doesn't have its natural predators there. It can establish. So it establishes itself. It reproduces naturally. So it starts putting out keiki. And then those keiki spread. So either by natural dispersal, that is birds taking the seeds and flowing them away, or it flying itself, as in the case with Australian tree fern, those spores float naturally. Or it's assisted dispersal. That is, it's a really popular ornamental plant, and people buy it and sell and put it in their yards and give it to their aunties, and aunties put it in their yards, and all goes to the church sale, and it goes to everybody's yards then. And then it forms a wild population. Then you've got it in natural areas. And it has to have impact. Yeah, we've got lots of plants or other species that are out in natural areas, but are they causing an impact, a measurable impact, really? Sometimes we can say no, but sometimes we can say yes. When we can say yes, then we've got the whole process filled out of something becoming invasive. Then you have an invasive species. And you may ask, isn't the roadside full of weeds? I've never seen a native species alongside a road. Yeah, it's really hard to find, except for H3. H3, you got lots. But yes, most roadsides in Hawaii are overrun with weeds and pests. But not all invasive plants and pests. Pests are the insects or diseases or animals. That's sort of the distinction. Not all of them merit removal or control. And not all infested sites warrant protection. H3, good example. Very, very high percentage of native plants all the way up towards the top on Townside going across to Kaneohe. You find an invasive species there, and we'll go through which ones, then yes, I would say merits control. But all the way down towards town, where the interchange is, perhaps, maybe not. You'll find African tulip there, various other trees, all sorts of invasives. Are you going to spend your time doing that? No. So it's up to you folks to become educated. Well, which ones really are those? Am I going to have to become a plant expert? No, but you're going to have to set your search images for some things that we're really concerned about. And it differs by island. So the term weed is sometimes used loosely, and in your manual it's sort of interchanged. And I think it's just to give you a little bit of a break from the word invasive all the time. A weed, basically in the manual, is equal to an invasive plant. And when you think about management, think about impact before you think about invasive. Impact is that it causes or has a potential to cause harm in the future to the environment, the economy, human health. If it's just a widespread plant, invasive plant, and it doesn't have these factors, then I wouldn't be too concerned about it. So, which ones do you need to control? As far as Department of Transportation is concerned, invasive species managed by Department of Transportation, it's called a priority invasive species or priority weed or priority pest. They're all the same. They would be the ones to control. And it's determined by context, not necessarily every single instance. Okay, my example is fireweed. This is a small sort of weed. It's a common plant on the Big Island. The flowers are about as big as a dime. There's always 13 petals on the flowers, little yellow, forms a little puffball when the seeds are ready to spread. It was introduced to Hawaii. It's not native to Hawaii. It's native to Madagascar, which is an island off of Africa, well out of its native range. On the Big Island, when it was introduced, it became so widespread, so quick, that today it's a common weed. If you drive over the Saddle Road, you'll see just fields of it all the way up, and it's beautiful. You'll see it sometimes pictured in tourist magazines, which drives me crazy, but that's okay. It's a common weed on the Big Island, so it's not warranted for control because it's so widespread. What you can do there, though, is to mitigate the spread. That is, clean your equipment before you move to a new spot. Clean all your gear, make sure you're not moving seeds and that sort of thing. On Kauai, however, it was introduced really probably only once, and it was introduced in hydromulch. And so it was sprayed onto a roadside. So this is a perfect condition. That's how it was spread throughout the rest of the Big Island as well, as hydromulch. Nobody noticed it there on Kauai. They noticed it right away, though, because they already saw what happened on the Big Island. It was a single site on a roadside. They detected it early, and they think they eradicated it now. They went to the roadside and pulled it every single day. This is the Kauai Invasive Species Committee and the Department of Agriculture. So now with you folks knowing about it, you see fireweed on Oahu. We're one of those islands that has very, very little, if any. And so you know now, little daisy, count to 13, start plucking that, then ask questions later. So it would be warranted for control here. So our priority weeds include weeds identified by Department of Transportation. There's training classes for which ones in specific areas. If they're listed on the federal and state noxious weed list, this is both two different lists that are regulated on the national level and state level. Provided that we're already working on them here. There's some species on these lists that we're not working on because they're already widespread. They're on the list because we don't want it to spread even further. The Invasive Species Committee, we have an Oahu Invasive Species Committee. They have a list of plants that they're working on that they have surveyed for and found to be low populations and possible to control or eradicate. Become familiar with their list. They have a great website, and I'll get to their contact information towards the end, or you can email me and I'll put you in contact with them, or call me. The old-fashioned way, you can just call me. If it has known impact to Department of Transportation roadside maintenance activities, the infrastructure or public safety. One great example of this, anybody heard of albizia trees? A lot of you folks have worked on them, tried to remove them from the roadside because they have the tendency to spontaneously drop limbs. They're an amazing public safety hazard, and so you folks have probably been contracted to either remove them or make sure that they're cleared from the roadsides. Or if it's a concern to a neighboring landowner and it's agreed upon by your engineer, your contracting engineer. So it may be something that on the Big Island, if there's an area that isn't totally infested with fireweed and they're trying to keep it out, the landowner's a small grass-fed beef ranch, and they're trying to pull this fireweed out because it's toxic to livestock, then they may ask the contractor, the engineer, to help by just keeping the roadside clear of it as well. So it's a special circumstance. It won't always happen, though it's more the exception than the rule. Priority pests. Again, these are insects and animals instead of plants. These are pests identified for early detection, eradication, or containment by the Invasive Species Committees or Department of Agriculture. On this island, we have almost no coqui frogs. If you have a new infestation of coqui frogs along your highway, you will be asked to help to participate in that control work, especially if you hear them. If you see them, yeah. Thank heavens they're night active and you guys are like not. So, the pests that are known to impact Department of Transportation roadside maintenance activities, the infrastructure or public safety, or if it's a concern to a neighboring landowner. Again, if a landowner is trying to control some pest on their land and they would really like the help of Department of Transportation, where you're working right outside their area, then we'll ask that you folks control it as well. Effective management along roadsides. There's a lot of different stages. It could be prevention, in which we would ask that you make an effort to stop the entry of a weed or pest. Or it could be early detection. We could ask you to monitor. We're asking you to watch for fireweed and prevent it. If you're, for some reason, you've got equipment coming in from the Big Island where they've been working along a fireweed infested area, then we're going to ask that you prevent that entry of that pest in. So just know it's there, know you need to hyper clean your equipment, and you're going to need to early detect. You're going to actively monitor that area where that equipment's being used. If it pops up, you may be asked for assistance with eradication, that is complete removal of the species from an island. That fireweed on Kauai is a great example. If you folks had been trained and you were working on Kauai, you would have been asked to help us in this effort. So now that you're being trained, you'll be asked to help us if it shows up on Oahu along a highway. Or control, limit the spread, the impact or the spread of something. And that would be just things like removing Albizia from the immediate roadsides. The phases of an invasion. Everybody's eyeballs kind of start drooping right around this time. But basically, it's a real simple way to show that the further you work this way, the easier it's going to be and the more likely you have of success. This is when you have none of the invasive species. If they enter, you've got this period where you can prevent it. So all of your efforts at prevention are here. Gear washing, primarily. If it shows up, you've got a very short period of time where you do early detection and hopefully eradicate. This is when you've got just a few popping up by the roadside. You got a chance. If you're early detecting and monitoring, you can eradicate it. You could potentially contain it to the area you're working. It's possible, not always easy to do, especially if it's things like coqui frogs. They tend to move a lot. And then when you get into high populations, all you can do really is just control it right in that immediate area that you work. You're going to have a lot more impacts. It's going to be a lot more costly when it gets to this point. So Albizia is at this point. On this island, coqui frogs and fireweed are at this point. So things to remember, prevention is always the best. Always report new weeds or new oddball things you don't recognize to the engineer as soon as it's detected. If you hear a bird calling early in the morning and it's not one you've heard before, it could be a coqui frog. They call it nighttime, but if it's still dark when you get up and you're starting to work in the morning, you could be hearing that coqui frog. Report it as soon as possible because these buggers reproduce quick. So prevention, you're looking at BMPs basically, best management practices to prevent things from entering. Um, you need to know what's of concern and what is sort of normal here. So we are asking you to become a little more aware of the plants and the animals and the insects that you're working with or alongside of. Feel free to contact the Invasive Species Committee. They know that this training is going on every island. They're involved. They're happy to come talk story with you guys, show you pictures, give you keys for what you're looking for, what we want to early detect and prevent. Wherever possible, minimize the disturbance to the soil, because once everybody knows, as soon as you put that that bulldozer down, all the weeds start popping up right there, because you're giving it a natural preference to the plants that are faster growing, the invasive plants. If you can, revegetate disturbed areas with desirable vegetation. Now, we don't say native. In some cases, it may be native, but in other cases, we're just talking about put something down, something non-invasive down. Use weed-free seed, mulch, and soil wherever you can. This is tested. In fact, that hydro mulch that came in was actually tested, but it wasn't discovered. So just be aware that if you get a new packet of stuff in, you want to try it, put it on the side first and see what pops up out of it. Get your things from reputable places. Thoroughly clean your stuff, your shoes, your gloves, before moving from an infested site to a non-infested site. You're working down the grubbiest roadside ever, and it's fall, and all the seeds are popping up, and you got seeds flying around, stuck to your pants, stuck to your boots, maybe those little legume sticker things that you have to pull out before you wash your clothes. Maybe those sandburrs are stuck. If you get a special opportunity to go to H3 right off the roadside the next day, wash your stuff first, including your shoes. That's one way you can help protect that area. Monitor high-risk areas. A new shipment of hydromulch came in and went in along the Pali Kamehameha highway. When they did that regrading of that hillside there, guess what popped up? Fireweed. Shucks. And it's happened before, and we knew it might happen, but we knew it might happen. So they watched and they monitored it, and sure enough, when it was detected, they went and pulled them all out. Evaluate your prevention efforts and modify accordingly. If you see things starting to spread in the areas where you have worked, just take a real critical look at your methods and see where you can make some changes. This is my car. This is a plant growing out of my car. I had my car detailed. Now, I don't spend money on my car. I don't spend effort cleaning it, so it's not a surprise to me. But here's what's surprising. When I was going to have my baby, I decided I was going to super clean it. I was going to treat myself to a detail because I couldn't bend over anywhere. I was like huge. So I had my car detailed. This car never went off-road. It's a Forester. It's a city car. It drove from basically the University of Hawaii to Pololo every day along the road. And yet, when I was on maternity, this plant started growing off this side. And I didn't even think about it. There was a bigger one that came out too. I didn't think about it. Like, what is growing on my car? I pulled it. I'm like, oh, outreach. I just pulled out a really good example, but I just waited again, and sure enough, another one popped up. Bring my camera. So anyway, it's possible. As careful as we are, no matter where we drive, these things spread. They're made to do it. They're made to ride on birds, so of course they're going to ride on trucks and cars. So clean your stuff. The soil carries lots of seeds. Make sure you designate a location on your site that's apart from your base yard. You know how to make a gravel area where you wash down your equipment. The water goes down into that sink area, and any plants or whatever it is, species that pop up, are going to pop up right there, and you'll be able to see it and control it right away. I keep my car cleaner these days, a little bit though. So how do you watch for new things? Early detection, that you just remain vigilant. You reduce the chance of species spreading beyond control and introduced to new sites. This is the pest hotline, 643-PEST. You are able to direct dial it from any island without a 1 or an 808. It's supposed to get you to the Department of Agriculture's pest hotline. If you see a snake, call this. And if they don't answer, call 911. Kill it. Carry ID aids, photographs of the target species that we're concerned about on Oahu. And again, you can go to the website and just look at some of these things. Report things to the pest hotline when you hear it, not like a year later. We had a community in Hau'ula that was starting to hear new birds at night. And they waited a year before they called. So of course they had not just one frog. After a while they had like a lot. And it turns out it was just piping, PVC pipes that had been shipped from Hilo. The frogs moved in that. The community didn't know what they were listening for, didn't call right away. Thought it was weird, but it never rang a bell. This should be the message to you folks that if a bell goes off, it's worth a call instead of not calling. And if you're worried about calling this number, call me. I'm happy to talk story with you, happy to, you want to take a picture with your smartphone and send it to me, or whatever it is you want to do, then I can help you out. Email your invasive species committee with a copy to the engineer if you have something to report. Include a photo, location details, and things like that so that we can document this process. How do you eradicate something? Well, you report them, priority pests and new and unusual species to the hotline. You can help in eradicating a species. However, it requires a long-term effort. It requires, really careful monitoring. If we need you in an effort, then we will let you know, let your engineer know, let the landscape manager at DOT know, and then we'll figure out if you folks are actually needed or not. However, we do have staff to be able to do this, and you folks can continue with your job. Control. When should an invasive species control work be done? If it's a hazard to road user, there's a good example of Albizia trees. Perilously large and leaning over a road, I'd control those. If the adjacent property owner or agency is controlling a weed or a pest, if the road passes through a conservation area that is a national park or preserve, we don't have too many of those on Oahu. They do on the Big Island. If an invasive species is locally abundant only along a stretch of road, there was a state highway passing through Hau'ula, we would have asked you to help us control if we could, but there wasn't. So the control, again, is the removal or treatment of invasive species to control unacceptable impacts at the local level, or to keep it spread from the area. You control, well, I control roaches in my kitchen. I try to prevent by keeping the things clean. I cannot eradicate because there's a space under my doorway where they can simply crawl back in again. I got an old house. There's lots of spaces like that that I don't even know about, I'm sure. And that's sort of how you need to think about it. You want to control the impacts. I'm controlling the possibility of roaches spreading oddball, yucky diseases in my house. BMPs for controlling invasive species in the right-of-way. This is the land along the side of a road that's managed by Department of Transportation. Your aim is to limit the local impact of a species. So preferably, you should control it before the seeds get set. Folks should know when Albizia is seeding, although the seeds are good in the soil for a long time, so you'll just expect them to pop up again anyhow. A designated cleaning area, routinely clean your things. This is all review at this point. Before moving, even within one management zone, routinely clean things. Keep records. When and where the control work was done, the number of plants controlled, the number of animals trapped, dates, people involved, all of that. Containment is restricting the invasive species to a limited area so it doesn't spread to new sites. Information signage at your place of work. It would be great if we could have the things that we're concerned about, a poster of fireweed placed at your place of work so that, when you take a look at it in the morning, you're like, fireweed, 13 petals, big as a dime. Um, it would be great. So if there's a space like that at your work, let me know, and we'll get some things together and we'll help you post them. Include the priority weeds and pests for your area. That would be all of Oahu at this point. Include notify the engineer and call 643 pest. As a part of the sign, we could do that. Include also the invasive species contact information, not just 643 pest. Sometimes, for whatever reason, if 643 pest is busy and you really want to report something fast, invasive species committees is another good avenue. Contact your local invasive species committee every January to obtain free new information sheets. They do surveys of the entire island, and they're always adding to their list of new oddball things that could be controlled. So they may have a couple of additional species every January. And this is important for species that are priority for early detection.
Do you know how the fire weeds keep that in the hydro?
Yes, where the hydromulch is made, it's not, it's kind of a widespread weed. So this came from Australia. And Australia is still not Madagascar. Fireweed spread through Australia as well. But where they gather up the seeds and things like that is just one of those weeds that pops up in there. And although when it came to the United States, it was tested for weed species, it's not on the federal noxious weed list. So although fireweed popped up, it was still let into the United States. When it came from the U.S., continental U.S. to Hawaii, it wasn't detected because it was already allowed into the U.S. So now we know, now they take handfuls of hydromulch seed and test it. But it still pops up, you know. It's just hard to find because it's mixed in with the other seed in its growing region. If we can get hydromulch or source it from somewhere other than Australia, that might be a good idea. There's an idea. Sadly, they produce cheap stuff. All field staff, DOT or private contractors should attend mandatory training each year on prevention and cleaning protocols, priority invasive plants. Really, I've just mentioned a couple. There's a few more, and training would be good. The current invasive species committee priority species and reporting procedures, it's not going to change much. You know, 643 pests, invasive species committee number, or me. Training is available from DOT and approved providers. I think you guys, SWCA, are you guys like an approved provider, or is it ISKS? Probably. Shahid said probably. Okay. And information about training can be obtained from the engineer. Reporting and inspection, we're winding it down, and then we're going to take a quiz. Contractors should keep a daily log of cleaning activities related to the vehicles. You should know where that thing's been. Whoever you hand off that log to needs to know where it's been, and if it's been cleaned or not cleaned or whatever it is. It should be turned over to the engineer prior to payment. That's going to be obviously a contract issue or requirement. Any priority species detected by staff and reported to authorities should be recorded in reports before you receive payment. An inspector may inspect cleaning logs and reports. So it can't all be written on the last day. You should just do it daily as a matter of course of work. Here is my contact information. Email if you prefer. I work on for a group called Coordinating Group on Alien Pest Species. You don't even need to remember that. That's my cell phone, so you can call me if you need to. Our website is cgaps.org. We're a statewide group, so you won't be finding Oahu-specific species on my website, but issues, if you want to know more about who we are, what we do, that's where we're located. The Oahu Invasive Species Committee, that's their direct phone line. They've got a base yard in Kailua, and they can get together all of this educational information for you and send it to you. If you if you want to call me first and I'll get it to you, then go ahead. Questions? Jay?
What are like maybe the 2 or 3 top priorities for Oahu right now as far as control?
2 or 3 top priorities for Oahu. I'll start with plants first, invasive plants. Myconia is the top species for Oahu. It's a plant that is native to Costa Rica. It's got a leaf with 3 midribs in it, and that's pretty rare for plants. So those veins going down the leaf. You turn it over, no matter how young or how old a plant is, the underside is purple, bright purple. So 3 midribs, purple underside, that's a Myconia plant, and you need to call. It takes over watersheds. It spreads very quickly. Each tree, when it's mature, it can get from seed to seeding in 4 years, and that's super fast for a tree. I mean, 4 years until it's like putting out fruit. Each tree can have 9 million seeds a year. These seeds are about the size of sand grains, little brown sand grains, and they're encased in little blueberry type berries that are yummy to birds. So these birds eat the berries, fly them off, poop them out wherever they poop them out, and they start growing. Well, these plants had been moved around in the nursery trade mostly around the 1970s, and they finally realized that it was an invasive plant and stopped doing that. Since then, the Department of Agriculture and Oahu Invasive Species Committee have mapped where every single Myconia plant has ever been, because the seeds last more than 10 years in the soil without sprouting sometimes. I mean, so they go and they pull out every single fruiting tree, they map it with the GPS, and they go back every year to pull out all of the keiki that pop up. And they got to do that in every single place for 10 years. So one of the places that these are found, Maunawili area, they found them out in Wahiwa. It was at the Botanical Garden way back when. They think they got rid of that. Manoa Valley you can find up past Light Arboretum on the side.
Is that still a big problem?
You shouldn't see any, because the Oahu Invasive Species Committee pulls them out every time they see them, every single one. But if you go to Onamea Scenic Drive on the Big Island, this is where it started. It is all over the roadside. Thousands, 100,000 acres of Myconia. If you draw a circle around all of the trees, 100,000 acres. And Onamea is the epicenter. So next time you go to Hilo, just drive Onamea Scenic Drive. Become familiar with what Myconia looks like. It grows right over the road. Clean your gear before you come back to this island. It's one of the biggest watershed threats we have. I don't know what the Big Island is going to do. Another couple of species I'll just mention really quick. Fireweed is a top species. We need to move more towards grass-fed everything, and we can't do that if we've got fireweed in the pastures. Koki frogs for animals, for sure. We're also looking for things like nettle caterpillars. If you're brushing up against the grass that you're cutting down or whatever it is, and you feel a burning sting and you see a spiky looking caterpillar, that's a nettle caterpillar, not native to here. We've got very few of them on this island. It's a reportable species. We want to try and control it where it is. You know, it's kind of a mottled black, but you'll just notice that it's spiky. Yeah, there's a population in Mililani area, so do watch for that. I think those are the top ones we're looking for right now. So, Koki frogs, yeah. If anything sings at night, Koki, that's the one. All right. I'm looking for, let's see, 9. Which one is mine? Oh, there. Thank you. I'm glad you're more organized than I am. Has anybody heard Koki frog before? Folks been to Big Island? Oh, you did? Wow. There's 2 types of frogs that are becoming present these days. One of them is Koki. They get a little larger. They have only a 2-note call. Koki? The other one is a greenhouse frog. It's slightly smaller, always has brown or black freckles on it. That's a greenhouse frog. You'll hear them calling at night, but it's no pattern. There's no pattern to the greenhouse frog call. It's like dip, 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 dip. Those are super widespread, and they're not really a subject of control. Sadly, they're like geckos now. They're everywhere. The other one is the coqui frog. Coqui frog, yes. Greenhouse frog, no. All right. Going through the review questions. All alien species are invasive. True or false? False. Some alien species are quite nice, like plumerias or bananas. Oh, not quite yet? Okay. I'm just excited. Do we have enough? I'm not sure if I passed enough back here. Oh, if you don't mind passing it back. Thank you. Okie dokie. So the answer to not all alien species are invasive, true or false? False. Some alien species, non-invasive, plumeria was the example I used, a couple of other ones. Mango, not causing a whole lot of harm. You know. Ooh. Number 2, not all roadside weeds need to be removed. That's right. We would have a very barren roadside if that were true. Priority weeds and pests were determined by the context in which they are found. Oahu, Big Island. That is true. Coqui frog on the Big Island. You know, if you're in Hilo, no. Here, always. So, in the context in which they're found. Number 4, priority weeds include only those identified by, are those only identified by in the contract specifications. True or false? Actually, we've asked that you contact each island's invasive species committee for new priority weeds. So in the contract, as well as updated every January. So your contract may be put in place, and all of a sudden, we hear that we've got a new pest. So we're going to ask that you watch for that too. You know, when nettle caterpillar first came on the scene, it was added to everybody's watch list immediately, regardless of what they were already doing. So the same is going to happen for you folks. Number 5, all equipment should be cleaned and completely free of soil, seeds, vegetative matter, or other debris that may contain plant parts or seeds prior to the initial arrival and or before leaving the maintenance site, or as a minimum before leaving the base yard. True or false? True. Had to read all the way through that, huh? Like, is this a trick question? Absolutely. If you think you have a new plant species at your work site, just wait until it flowers and fruits and then try and identify what it is. False. False. If you don't know what it is, reach out to some of your resources. I'm a resource. Invasive Species Committees are a resource. Just reach out to us and we'll try and help you out. Number 7, as long as you clean your equipment, you are not required to keep cleaning logs. False. As an HDOT employer contractor, you can protect the Hawaiian Islands by always reporting any new species you see in your management area. True. Number 9, cleaning station is the same as your base yard. True or false? It could be a site away from your base yard where you're working. So you may need to clean before you go onto the highway to get back to your base yard. It is false. Number 10, when you control a species, you accept that reinvasion cannot be easily prevented and will likely occur at your site. Your concern about weed or pest impact justifies your continued effort. Surely, albizia trees are going to grow again. Does that mean you're not going to cut them next time? No, they're still going to be, you just accept that it's going to be an ongoing control effort, and that's the way we need to see some of these species. If it comes back, it's still going to have that same impact, and we're concerned about it, so we're going to control it again, and again, and again. Number 11, it is possible that you don't have to control species A in one part of the island, but you do have to control it in another part of the island. True or false? True. Definitely. Number 12. Because Hawaii Volcanoes National Park is controlling certain weeds, Department of Transportation should also control these weed species in their right-of-way adjacent to the national park. True or false? True. If you're working in Hawaii Volcanoes and there's a highway going through it, and they're controlling strawberry guava inside their area, if it's growing along the roadside, it makes no sense for them to clean out the park if it's just going to reinvade by your roadside. It's an agreement that you folks will work on it too. That isn't always the case, but. Number 13, to prevent establishment of invasive species, you should constantly disturb the soil. False. Try not to disturb the soil. Number 14, last one, to prevent establishment of invasive species, you should regularly spray equipment with pesticides. I don't believe that is an approved pesticide application to spray. So hopefully you folks will have put down false. Thank you very much for your attention. I appreciate your help out there. And again, want to talk stories, give me a call.
Hey, one question.
Yeah, Jake.
We have a little time.
Okay.
There's a big push to plant natives, wherever we can.
Yep.
One of those places on the roadside. Can you talk a little bit about some of the problems there and maybe what are some of the better natives to try out?
The move to using more native species, I think, is great. It's got to be the right plant in the right place, as with any species, as with any effort, native or not. I think some of the best pioneering efforts is done by Joe DeFrank's lab with use of peely grass and other types of grasses along roadsides. You know what? Tall grass is just going to grow there anyway. Peely grass was some of the toughest, most weather-resistant plants out there. And it's a desirable plant. We have people all the time looking for peely grass for cultural uses, and so wouldn't it be great if we could have more peely grass growing along the roadside? It's going to require a change in mindset, though. We see those letters to the editor sometimes in the paper. Oh, why don't they mow along H2? Why don't they interchange that? It looks like a jungle up there. Well, it's because the grass is growing tall and it's being let to seed, which is a natural process. What's happened to us that we have to mow everything all the time. Peely grass needs to grow up, grow tall. When it's tall, obviously it does that twisting thing at the top. That's the peely part. We just need to change our mindset. So I think that that's a fantastic effort. I think we need to start promoting a change of aesthetics in some places. And I think it's great that using more of the native species that are resistant to being chopped down all the time. The alpaca plantings are fantastic. I'd like to see more. But having said that, there's also not always an appropriate native to be used for the area, and sometimes it's going to be a non-native, and that's fine too. I think one last species that I'd like to tell you folks about before we move along, it should be on our top list of species to watch for here. It's called little fire ant. These ants are called little fire ant for a reason. I mean, they are so small. When they sting, you can hardly see it. So you just sort of wipe your arm because it's so small you can't see it. They're native to South America. They've been moved around in plants and planting material. They were accidentally brought to the state, to the east side of the Big Island, back in the late 90s. It has since spread to a lot of neighborhoods in East Hawaii. It's just recently been found in Kona side, again, moved in plant material. We don't think we have it on Oahu, but the way things move back and forth all the time, there's a chance that you may encounter it. You guys working with these materials all the time, and some of your stuff is sourced, the plants you're putting in the ground are sourced from the Big Island. You guys are going to be the ones to find it first. So what are you looking for? You're looking for very tiny orange-red ants. The whole body, the thorax, the abdomen, the head is just one color of orange. The head is as big as the butt. Okay, so you guys sometimes get stung by big-headed ants. These are the ones with the really, really big head and the really tiny butt. That's not the ones. Those you can see easily. Lots of parks have them. They're one of the other few stinging ants we have here. These other ones, little fire ants, same size head as butt, completely orange color, very tiny, and they're rather slow moving. So if you suspect that that's what you have or that's what you see, then just give the hotline a call, call the Invasive Species Committee. Heck, you can even consult with me if you'd like, because we really should check up on it. Again, you guys are going to be the first ones to see it. If it's not landscape industry, it's going to be you guys. It was recently found on Maui. This woman had an organic farm, and she was just, doing her Maui thing, organic farming. I used to live there, so I can tease. And she put on her glasses and got stung, because I said, oh, that's not normal. Well, one of the, I know, yeah. That's how they do it on Maui, though. That's how they rule. Anyway, one of her, the people that worked for her said, oh, I just took a training by the Maui Invasive Species Committee a couple years ago, and it might be little fire ant. You should call. So she called Department of Agriculture. They confirmed it was little fire ant, and she was convinced that she needed to do everything she could to get rid of it. So they said, we're going to need to use pesticide. You're going to lose your organic certification for your farm. She says, okay. So they went in and they used anticides. I don't know what it's actually called, but ant-killing pesticides. Well, there's a ranicide, and that's a frog-killing pesticide. I never knew these words. I'm a marine biologist. So anyway, they used these newly approved ant-killing baits and techniques to get rid of him on Maui, and they just declared total eradication from that island. I hope we don't find him on this island, but if we do, I hope it's reported quickly, and I hope that they do whatever they can to get rid of it, because we don't want these. In the islands where these ants have been moved, and there's some Pacific islands, more rural than we are, more tied to the land than we are today. These ants are so thick in population size that they cover almost everything. And the animals that live outside, including the wild animals, the pets, are just inundated, and they're stung all the time. And what happened is that their eyes are stung, which gives them a cut in their eyes, tiny, but it allows bacteria in, and these animals are blind. So in some of these islands where these ants exist, the wild pigs are blind. You would think that'd be a good thing, wild can't get away. But the hunting dogs are also blind. The people in their houses, they're getting stung. And we just can't live like this. If you've got relatives on the Big Island in these areas where these ants are becoming real high in populations, they have to use pesticides now in the yard quarterly. Big Island's got a lot of things. And we got to really be careful. We got to start thinking different, because they've got such a mindset of being able to freely import plants that we need to start thinking differently about how we do things in the future. Yeah, they got everything, but not everything that they could have. So it's not too late. There's a few places in Kona. Again, it was a nursery that imported plants. So beware. That's one of the top things that, you know, I'll be amazed if we don't find them on this island. I'll be amazed. Okay, I think my time's
Shaheen
up.
has one
Oh,
question.
Shaheen. Oh, yeah. Mhm. Yeah, that's a good point Shaheen's brought up. Um, you know, when we go to the store, when we do our work, we just select plants that we think are going to be good. Maybe we've used them before. Uh, if you're looking for plants, though, there is now a way to tell whether it's predicted to be invasive in Hawaii. And wow, wouldn't that be great if we'd used that before we brought in Myconia? It's basically about 40 questions about a plant, looking at its biology, its performance elsewhere, and all of this stuff is online. The world is amazing these days. You can do a background check on a plant to see how it's performed elsewhere. And not only that, you don't need to do that work. Someone else does this work for us. There's 2 biologists on staff, funded with the state, that will check a plant. And they've already run plants through this system. They've done more than 1,000 plants so far. So if you're curious about using a plant either in your personal life or along the roadside, check to see if that plant is predicted to be invasive or if it's causing a problem elsewhere. Because then it might be a good indication, well, maybe I'll just choose something else. There's tons of plants out there, and there's a tiny, tiny percentage that'll be invasive here. So why not just take that extra step and look? That if you're online, you can Google weed risk Hawaii, and you'll find that list. You'll find the contact information. Or if you want to email, it's hpwra@yahoo.com. That's Hawaii Pacific Weed Risk Assessment, hpwra@yahoo.com. Or pick up the phone and call me. We're the Invasive Species Committee. You know, that's what we're here for. I think that was my time. I think it is up.
Thanks, Chris.
I didn't put anybody to sleep this time. That's fantastic. Seriously, when the supervisors were here, oh, I had to bring out all the funny stories because they were falling asleep. Maybe. They heard it all.
Okay,